Let's stand and have a word of prayer and a pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful new day. We thank you for the recent rains and the a bit cooler weather. We just come before you today with some big topics, Lord, that affect our county, affect our city, affect future fire protection for our citizens. We just pray, Father, that you'll give us the wisdom and ability to exchange ideas and arrive at the best possible solution. We just turn this matter over to you in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's give you all some of my talking points here. Make me about 8 more copies in there. Yeah, make a total of 7. We're waiting on Nathan Tafoya, who is en route, rather than getting anything started before he gets here. I hope he's almost here. Here's a few more you may need to fill the gap, James. These are just some of my notes that I put together over the weekend, just to help me remember what all to discuss, just in case you wanted to see what I'm talking about. And before Nathan gets here, just to kind of bring you up to date, just with some general comments, and you can start with the top of my notes there. The Fire Advisory Board, at least what we're calling it right now, as a reminder, let me tell you who has been meeting together on this fire protection contract. And we've had 3 meetings thus far at the City Hall. We've got Ed Thatcher, the city manager, Chief McRae, the 2 councilmen, Tim Dale and Galen Adams, and then Mikhail Reeves, who's their chief financial officer. On behalf of the county, myself and Dana, and our chiefs, Marcus Williams, Jerry Ward, and then Barbara is also a member of that committee. We will have our next meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock, so I tried to schedule this meeting to where we can have hopefully some cohesive and complete thoughts to give to that committee based on discussions here with just us here from the county. And I just saw Nathan come in, so before we continue with fire protection, let's divert back to Nathan, and Nathan's going to give us just a few minutes here, and he's going to follow up on the conversation that we began, was that 3 weeks ago, roughly, and Nathan had come to us with an ask that we consider the Mount Pleasant EDC in our budget discussions, in our discussions regarding use of the American Rescue Plan funds. And that has generated some thoughts and comments among the commissioners, and it's given Nathan a chance to maybe bring back to you some ideas that he has had, that he's expressed to me, that might give you all some more assurance or confidence in what it is that he's asking for. So Nathan, if you'll come on up to the podium, tap that mic, and I think I turned it on, but just make sure it's live. Yeah, there you go. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Judge Lee, appreciate the time here today. Wanted to, as Judge Lee was mentioning, address any sort of maybe presumption I might have had with the commission and the commissioners to make sure my thought process was kind of aligned with yours, and make sure I was being a little more transparent about what my end goals were. And so realizing that some of my conversations with Judge Lee and just some of the county commissioners, what could be potential holdups to a project like this, I wanted to just come in and what I could have considered maybe a downstream, maybe a contractual terms finessing. I think maybe we should address right here since this is a first time, I think the county or the EDC has approached the county and asked for funds like this. So one of those was, should the commissioners elect to move forward with a project like this, which I call, a pilot investment. I thought one of the things we could address would be, that at the end of, first off, that make it look or mirror it a lot like what the city of Mount Pleasant does. So contractually and by state law, any economic development organization cannot disperse funds without first having council approval. So we have a budget we're set, we can operate within, but even within our budget, sometimes the EDC will just go to the city council and say, hey, we're giving NTCC a scholarship for CDL for drivers, and it's $25,000, and they'll approve it. So if there's over a certain amount, and just based on kind of discretionary pieces within our budget, we'll do that. But we thought that might be a one point of helping the commissioners kind of understand how we're working and what our mindset is as we approach this. Is one, not necessarily having a blank check or kind of any sort of just completely discretionary fund. Any project that we would have, some of them they may be coming from you. A few of you have talked to me about a few of your businesses within, tucked back on certain roads that maybe needed improvements. If there were hiring needs or equipment issues that they were having, you guys would be in a better position than me to understand, hey, they're coming to you saying, hey, we're having this issue. Approach us, say, listen, yeah, let's go help them with that equipment cost, share that, and help them be more productive and stay operational in the county. So things like that. So anything, so the point of that kind of got muddled was, could we could have within the contract, again, this is a term issue in my opinion, that commission approval would be needed. So every time we would disperse funds, we come to you guys to listen, such and such company is looking to do something, or we're looking to take down a burnt building and it's an eyesore for this small community. Can we help them take it down and create a new opportunity for a future operator there or something like that?
So point number one you're saying is, we give you, according to your initial proposal, we give you $300,000 a year for a couple of years.
Yes.
And then I know there was some concern here, well, where's that money going to go? What's he going to do with it? Okay. You're saying any dollar that's spent out of that fund that's set aside as county earmarked,
yes,
would get our approval before those funds are expended, because we may disagree with what your intentions are to do with some of that money. We may
Absolutely.
say, no, we don't support something like that. Don't spend our money.
Absolutely. And even coming into and making this request, in my mind, I was really cognizant of how public bodies work and how sensitive investments are. And so I really, using this opportunity of having federal a historical and unprecedented amount of federal funds coming into state and local municipalities for specifically businesses and for infrastructure. I thought it was a really good time to say, listen, we can pilot this 2 years on a contract basis. You guys could not renew if you chose not to, but then to further de-risk it, of course, you guys need to have a say in whether or not the funds are dispersed. And then, secondly, one of the things that kind of came to mind was if the funds are not used, obviously, it's more of like a set-aside restricted account more than it is you guys just like cutting us a check. I would imagine that's how it would look. And that could go a number of ways. Again, that is administrative. The idea here is there political will at this commissioner in this commissioner court to kind of approach economic development in this sense. So, you know, the funds, second point would be they come back to the county if they're not used. I don't know why they wouldn't. And I don't know
but if for whatever reason that money just sat there and sat there and sat there, we write into the contract that after a given point of time, the county has the option to ask for those funds back. Hey, Nathan, you're not using them. We can use that money. If you're not going to, we want a refund. And
I would almost even say it could be within the 6 years, because let's say there's a natural disaster or something, and obviously there'll be other funds that are kicked in. But if there's an immediate need, that's what the fund is more of an immediate set aside for how projects work in economic development. It's in my mind, it's the equivalent in layman's terms of getting some sort of pre-approval letter from a bank to buy a house. It just creates issues and risk when they're like, well, just you go find a house you like, your dream home. If a bank said this to you and said, come back to us, they could be on vacation, you know, the underwriter, you never know what could happen. Maybe they can't get to it in the next few days, their kids are sick. But there's issues of 1 to 2, 3 weeks between county meetings that projects could be lost. Sometimes they're moving pretty quick. They need to find spots, and they're looking at other communities, surrounding communities, and if we want to locate them here, or if there's an immediate need within existing businesses, it would be to have a set-aside fund. One, it signals intent and dedication. When we put that on our website, when we let communities coming into our community know, hey, the county is supportive, the city is supportive, you have a safety net if you're coming into Titus County at every level of government. And that is a very strong signal.
We have money in the bank. The county's already committed.
And is dedicated.
Shown their support. You know, here's their bank balance with the EDC.
Absolutely.
And they're ready to go. And then we can throw together emergency meetings as well to match up with that time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point of the thing was just to make that point of having it set aside and dedicated, so we can move quickly if needed. But the point has always been, and hopefully just knowing that from some of my conversations with some of the county commissioners, is to de-risk this and to make it, this is a county fund for county projects. Have a say in it. It comes back to you. How else can we de-risk, that this is out there? And I think all those can be done contractually, as we form that document. And just realizing that that's where the heart of this is coming from, where the letter of the law applies, but just understanding the spirit of it is intended to be an assistance and to be helpful to local businesses and incoming future businesses.
One thing that we'll need to talk to our consultant about, we do have some time frames on using that ARPA money. You've got to have that money committed by the end of 2024. So 2 years and 4 months from now, we've got to say what we're using that money for. Mm-hmm. I don't know if just saying, well, we're giving it to the Economic Development Corporation for them to, attract new businesses into the county. I don't know if that's an adequate earmark of those funds, or if we have to say, yeah, the pipeline is going to feed through the EDC, but it's going to be used for a specific project. I haven't talked to him about that. We'll have to get his thoughts on that. And then that money's got to actually be spent by the end of 2026. So again, I don't know if we've met the definition of earmarking those funds and spending those funds when we write you a check, or if it's got to be seen through to the end. You got any thoughts on that?
If y'all will recall, at one of our last meetings, y'all suggested that we go ahead and go out for RFQ to get an engineer or an architect to work on the annex across the street. So I called Mr. Taylor at that time and let him know, because he'll be doing those bids in the future. And he explained to me that anyone we give any money to, down to just a few cents, we will have to follow, and that organization would have to agree to follow right down to exactly where those funds were used. We were not allowed, and I asked the very question because you had been here to speak to, Mr. Tafoya. Could we do that? Could we give them $300,000, trust them to make the best decisions, or come back, and meet with y'all? But even if we do all of that, even if we get a contract with you, even if we give you the money, we, Mr. Taylor, at our cost, will have to follow that right down to every penny. Let me give you another example. The road materials that we just approved, for the materials for the roads that we're going to put those materials on, your invoice will have to have that road number on there. They have to follow right down to that level. So I'm sure that we can't just agree to say $300,000. There's going to be a lot more paperwork. So if we decide to do that, I would caution you that our contract needs to say that you agree to follow those things and make those items available, and that whatever garbage needs to be.
And that makes
happen.
sense. I mean,
yeah,
you just can't come up with ways like this to circumvent the strings that are attached.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, I would imagine, as infrastructure goes, that it would include rail, it would include fiber, it would include certain things like that, and which we're mindful of, and we're working with a few providers for larger broad-based. And I know they've come and talked to the county as well. But infrastructure has a lot of different uses, and one of the things, again, we could talk about this on the contractual and what the ARPA rules are, but there's somewhat of a benefit of using a public entity as well, because we're not a private contractor, we're not and the pass through of public funds to another public entity is a lot easier when it flows through those channels. But we also can operate a little bit like the private sector. Secondly, the ask in the letter was a pin in the map, and to get the commission to really understand some of the investment levels that we feel could be expended. That doesn't necessarily mean they all need to be ARPA funds. If there is a hybrid, let's just say year one is $300,000. If there was $50,000 of county funds and then $250 of ARPA that we could help you just assist with or not. But even if there was that 50, there are identified projects now that we could use those funds towards, and so there could be a hybrid of an investment, and being mindful of that too, because of restrictions. And one of the reasons why I believe, I won't go into too much of it, but Texas can be successful is because there aren't a lot of restrictions. Communities don't necessarily have to go after federal funds because of some of those restrictions, and so we're able to be a little more flexible, which is kind of indicative and represented in the success of Texas, I believe. But is that
questions for Nathan?
And I'll say this last thing real quick too. One of the reasons why I thought this would be an interesting proposal for the county and more palatable was, one, the EDC was established in 1994. It's the successor of what traditionally towns and communities and cities they all had what are called industrial foundations, and these kind of came out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s when high net worth individuals and business leaders and banks kind of would fund an organization for one or two employees to help be some sort of landing spot or point of contact for companies coming in. They just, they're doing their banking, they got other things going on. They needed some sort of dedicated person. When the EDC came about in 1994 through an election, it allowed us to operate within the city. So one of the reasons for me asking for the contract as well, regardless of how the capital stack is created, was to avoid having to come to the county and having to come to the citizens and re-educating everyone and going through a costly vote, and to have something established through those channels in a vote to establish some sort of commitment to economic development. It was just saying, listen, how can we have a finite time frame and a finite number, which can change. So that number, if needed, could change. But just to say you could not be in it if you didn't need to, or if things didn't work out on the ARPA side. So I wanted to say that, like, the whole approach from the beginning of this ask was to say, listen, how do we give the county commission and the EDC an opportunity, to participate in county deals, and how do we protect the county as a sister public agency from potentially having a very long-term commitment and contract, but just say, let's test this out. There are existing and imminent needs for those funds now, and I just making sure that you guys understood that, one, and looking for avenues and channels to make those sorts of things happen, so, and de-risk it for you.
I think as a wrap-up here, and I do need to wrap up with you because we've got to talk about fire, perhaps there's an opportunity in the weeks ahead to schedule a time where we could go into executive session and discuss some of the things that you've got going on that most of us don't have a clue, what's going on. And that helps us to better understand, okay, now I see why you need funds like that. But it's a whole lot easier for these guys to put their money towards something where, hey, yeah, we believe in this, that will help the county, and we can understand how making an expenditure like that does have dividends that come along with it, whereas, just putting it into a fund, it's hard to envision that. So
I understand. I
appreciate you coming up here. Don't anybody have a question for him before we say goodbye?
Brian, I've got one. Nathan, do you know of any other counties anywhere around that do this, that are joined in with the EDC?
I have not looked. I don't know.
I just wondering if any of the rest of the counties around surrounding us here might have joined in with it in this same.
Yeah.
So, like I do know, like in the metro areas, because of the restrictions on population for EDCs to exist, the counties and the cities are all involved. They pull their funds and fund it on a budget basis. Their economic development activity, like McKinney, Tarrant County, like they all have economic development programs. But as far as the local, regional, small communities, I haven't bothered to look.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming up.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nathan.
All right, back on fire protection. Anyway, tomorrow we have a 3 o'clock meeting back with the same fire advisory board, and we'll bring our county comments back. There are 4 voting members that was determined by this fire advisory board, and we decided that should be the 2 city council representatives and the 2 county representatives, which at least right now is judge and 1 commissioner. Assisting in the drafting of the contract that you were emailed a copy of, which again, that's where it is at this point. There potentially may be lots of changes made to that contract, but you were given a copy of where we are as of the last time that we met. We had an HR attorney that the city has used for the last couple of years. Her name is Lee Ream. I spoke with Kerry Wooten, and he said he would review the final product in the way of the final draft, or as we get towards the final draft. But when the city was deciding who would help them and help us to put together this contract and change the wording and put it in the appropriate format, he agreed that Ms. Ream would be perfectly acceptable to do that. Mr. Coburn has received a copy of that, and we will certainly want him to review any contract that the county enters into. We may even want to have another attorney with more specialized skills representing the county. We can do that now. We can bring our own attorney up to those fire advisory board meetings as we work on this. I personally don't think we need it yet, but we'll yield to Mr. Coburn. I think will give us some guidance there. He has the name. I put Mr. John Boofy that we've utilized before. Might be another good resource for us to use if we wanted to have an attorney representing us in this contract. For the past 10 months, Chief McRae has presented every other month to the court. This was my request so that the court could be more aware of the capabilities of our volunteer fire departments to provide fire protection. The chief and I have met on a regular basis, one-on-one for many years, and so a lot of that information, doesn't always disseminate to the members of the Commissioners Court. We've got a 10-year contract that we are at the tail end of right now. It initially was scheduled to end at the end of September back in 2020. We did extend it 2 different times, 1-year extensions. It began as a fixed amount, and it had a CPI annual adjustment on there so that price continued to go up each year with a relatively moderate adjustment. This new contract that you've been provided is in its present form, is a 5-year contract with automatic 5-year renewals unless a 12-month written notice is given by either party to, bring it to an end. In other words, if you in that 5th year, you could say we don't want to renew this again. There are also default provisions within the contract that allow a 60-day cancellation if there are, clear and obvious defaults that cannot be cured. So let's say we quit paying our money or the city quits providing fire protection. That's clearly a default, and if the parties are not willing to, to cure those defaults, the other party can give notice that they're canceling the contract. These are just my opinions. They don't necessarily represent those of Dana Applewhite nor Judge-elect Cooper, who has also been at our meetings. So I've got just a few comments there. I still believe that the best form of city-county fire protection is joint cooperation between the city and the county. I think that it reduces capital expenditures. If you were to total all of those capital expenditures, say, should the county decide to pull away from the city or vice versa, it reduces the total number of fire protection staff and equipment, and it relies on the premise that the frequency of overlapping events is low, and therefore an independent city or an independent county fire department would be an inefficient way to use capital and manpower, because both the county and the city are all providing enough staff to operate independently rather than relying on a smaller amount of staff and assuming that smaller staff could take care of both fire and county, because we don't have duplicity in emergency events that happen very often. The county has seen a significant reduction in volunteer participation in recent years. This is not unique to us. This is a nationwide, if not worldwide, problem. Our volunteer departments are unable to provide consistent and adequate protection without some city backup. I believe that the volunteer chiefs realize this and they agree with that. I think that the city has offered a reasonable solution. They first made this presentation to us when we met there in council chambers back 3 months or so ago. And in this solution, the county would pay a percentage of the city's total fire protection expenses, including capital outlays. 40% was their suggested participation level, And that 40% would be implemented with 5 annual hikes. Initially, or here October 1 of this year, we would take on 32% of the city's proposed 2022-2023 budget. In other words, their year begins the same as ours, October 1 of 22, and finishes up in September of 2023. And then each year after that, there would be an additional 2% hike until we arrived at a total of 40% when we began that 5th budget year. The county payment in this contract is based on a proposed budget, not an actual. In other words, we know that proposed budgets are not audited actual numbers. This is what we think we're going to spend in the upcoming year. This is not what we spent in the prior year. This agreement is based on us paying into the city based on a proposed budget. And then there's a rebate to the county at the end of the year based on audited numbers. For example, let's say we have a $3.7 million proposed city fire budget for the year beginning October 1 of 2022. And the county would then start paying in their 32% in 12 monthly equal installments. At the end of that period of time, after the audit is complete at the city, let's say they came back and said, well, we actually only spent $3.5 million of that $3.7. Then the city, within a specified amount of time, somewhere around January following the end of the budget year, would be rebated back in a lump sum to the county. The city plans to add in this year's budget, 2022-23 budget, 3 full-time firefighters initially, with a ramp up to a total of 12 to 15 total additional firefighters over the next 2 to 4 years. Now, city plans can change, and they may decide that's not feasible in a given year. They may reduce that. They may stay right on top of that. It may take them 5 years to get there. I don't know, but that's the chief's wishes, and his intentions are to get a total of 12 to 15 total additional firefighters over the next few years. Additional firefighters would give ability for the city to provide another engine company that would be needed if and when a third station decision is made. In the meantime, that additional staff would be stationed at the Highway 49 location. This will allow more firefighters to be dispatched to the city or the county emergencies and still have backup for overlapping events. So the comment has been made, well, this assumes that we are going to have that third station. I do think that the city does believe, and I believe myself, that eventually we're going to have a third station. Is it going to be in 3 years? I don't think so. Is it going to be in 5 years? Possibly. A lot of that has to do with what are the growth patterns of our community? What are the new businesses that are coming in? Where are the additional housing developments going to be? But if we all want future growth for our community, common sense would tell you that eventually we're going to need a third station, or we're going to need some additional staff. Chief McRae feels like, and I think that the city manager and the city council support him in the belief that whether I have an actual physical building, third fire station that exists somewhere or not, I still need some additional firefighters to meet the commitments that we're making in this county contract and to meet the expectations that the city has for fire protection. Based on discussions with Ed Thatcher, with Tim Dale, and with Galen Adams, there are no current plans to approve that third station, nor have any locations been determined. Locations will likely be determined by a third-party expert and they may locate it in the city, they may locate it in the county. I don't think that location is so much important as where is the smart location for it to be based on city, county development, housing development, business development, etc. In our last meeting, these were some of the comments that I remembered. There may have been some others, and these were comments that were brought by Commissioner Applewhite and Judge-elect Cooper. They felt like perhaps a shorter contract period rather than 5 years might be better. Perhaps maybe a 2-year to allow changes in the Commissioner's Court and the new faces that would be on the court to have more say-so rather than being stuck within a contract that had several more years to go on it. The concept of a fixed payment rather than a percentage payment was discussed. Perhaps a lower level of financial participation of the county to achieve the kind of fire protection that we needed. And then if a third station location is determined to be needed, and if it was decided that that station should be in the county and outside of the city limits, would that change the city's willingness to build that station and to fund it as if it was in the city? I think that they answered that yes, and we can work that into the contract if you wanted. We're not so hung up on where the station is located. We just want it to be in a smart location. So we've got an hour and 20 minutes to talk about this, and we may or may not finish. I don't know. I guess we could recess and meet back tomorrow before the 3 o'clock meeting tomorrow afternoon. But we have Commissioner Applewhite, we have Judge-elect Cooper, you've got your 2 volunteer chiefs that are here. So I'll open up this meeting for discussion. We've got John Coburn here. So I don't know who wants to go first. John Coburn wants to go first, and we need to get a microphone in front of you, and we can move that one down.
I'm going to ask these volunteer firemen a question.
You going to get some testimony?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So did you say?
How about we just pass that mic back there, and they can sit right there. Tap it and make sure it's on. Oh, here's
One.
We're going to get it.
Okay. When I was thinking, I've been doing some thought to this since I was asked to be a little bit more involved in this process. And one of the things that I was thinking about is, I understand. I mean, I go to Rotary, I go to different volunteer programs, and I see, there's no question, Judge is correct. The number of people are diminishing. There's no question about that. So, and I heard people say that's a problem that y'all are having with volunteer fire departments. Is that's a fair statement, correct?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
So this contract negotiation is making some assumptions, right? It's assuming that is a current state and that's going to be a continued state. So my initial question would be, what if, just hypothetically, the county was to devote more funds to volunteer fire departments? Would that make a difference? So you don't think that would make any difference?
No, we had a house fire the other night at 2:15 in the morning. He was going to work at that time, but the rest of us were generally off for those late night calls. At that point, we gained 1 structural firefighter. That meant at that point we had, with Mount Pleasant being there, that gave us 4 people to go in and fight a structure fire, with 1 from the county, 3 from the city. Somebody has to pump the truck. We're not getting the support. We don't have the support. Most of the departments, 5-star currently has 1 structural firefighter with new gear ready to go into a structure. Another one that is closing, that's certified and all that. He just needs a couple of hours CE, and then he'll be back. Jerry has how many? 4 structural firefighters. Nortex has 2 structural firefighters. These numbers I'm giving you don't count the volunteers that are also city firefighters. So most likely, if they're there, they're probably there with the city.
Say that again. Did you say those numbers do include some professional or don't? That's net volunteer. That's true volunteers that are not employed as a firefighter. Okay.
Well, that, I appreciate that, because, I'm just trying to understand that there's a limit. And if we can't get the recruitment, you can't recruit, and you can't get volunteers, then we're totally dependent, almost totally dependent on the city. So that kind of changes my analysis. So let me ask you this: how many firemen do we have possibly?
31 or 36 or 32?
33.
So they're talking about doing about a 50% increase in fire.
What that's going to do, it's going to allow us to have a second engine company respond to every structure fire in the county. That's going to give you a total of 8 men responding. So theoretically, you're going to have 1 truck, 1 guy committed to pumping the truck. That's going to give you 7 firefighters to fight a structure fire. If nobody from the county shows up to fight fire, we'll be there with water, hopefully, but we don't have the personnel to fight that fire. So there, yes, if you're working a major structure and you go through 2 air bottles, you're done. I mean, you're exhausted. And so therefore, your initial attack's going to be save lives. And I don't want to be on scene when it comes to the point that we cannot get in there and save somebody, and we have to explain why we weren't able to get there because we didn't have the personnel to do it.
So it's your 12 to 15.
Yes, I am all for the second engine company responding to fires.
We're losing volunteers. We just don't have them before they're getting old. I'm fixing to turn 59 years old. Ain't been another year or 2, I'm going to hang up my structure gear. Your body just gets out after a while. The new people, the new generation, just don't want to get involved and volunteer their time. And, we tell them the county gives us money to pay them for some of the runs and stuff like that. But still, they're not interested in it. They got other things on their mind they want to do. The guy that's out there right now, some of them's been around the fire service for a while. Not paid professionals. We like to think we are sometimes, but we just do the best we can with what we got. And you got to have volunteer fire departments out there. Because Mount Pleasant just can't do it all by themselves, especially when you have 2 or 3 different calls going at one time. And we've seen that in the past. You got to have the volunteers. We need Mount Pleasant coming out to help us out. Right now in the Tri-Lakes District, if we had a structure fire, a car wreck, or whatever, they're going to wait on Mount Pleasant to get there. If Mount Pleasant's up in Sugar Hill doing something right now, I ain't got no one out there to respond to, after 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So if someone's pinned in a car, they're just going to lay there until they can cut someone loose. Because they cannot dispatch more than 1 truck out of the city limits at one time. They have to keep a truck inside the city limits. With this extra staff and extra trucks, then it'd be possible to do that.
Well, Judge, that's a couple of my initial thoughts, is that, before we get into the negotiation standpoint, we need to understand our needs. And it sounds like, these are our subject matter experts who are out there living every day. So that helps me kind of understand the issue a little better.
Here again, my opinion, but I think these guys will back me up. does that mean just because what they told you is true that we have to enter into this contract? No, I don't think that it does. I think that the county can always decide we are going to provide this level of fire protection, not this level. We're going to provide this level. And folks, that means that instead of everybody's house fire being attended, we're going to get to 50% of you. And therefore, more structures are going to be lost. More people will probably die. I mean, you do have other alternatives. But if your commitment is up here, you can't achieve it with this level of personnel and equipment commitment. You can schedule it there, and you might get lucky, but the odds are at some point, and probably real soon, it's going to bite you. And so we have to decide, do we want to provide the very best that we can, or are we willing to tell the folks within the county, you've chosen to live out in the county, and therefore you've made a choice to have less fire protection services available than you would if you were in the city. So that's always an alternative. But in the fire protection business, nobody wants to be the person in charge who's made that decision. I don't think any of these guys want to answer that family who's lost a loved one or a home. Well, sorry, we told you that when we were budgeting for fire protection.
I don't speak for them, but it sounds like what you're saying to me is that the county may support the idea that the city needs these people now. Because one of the things I was thinking about was, when these numbers stall out, when the economy is going gangbusters and people are selling their houses for 3 or 4 times their work, or we're going potentially into a recession when they aren't getting one. What's the growth outlook for the county and the city in the next few years with the current status we're in? It's real unknown. But it sounds like to me they're saying that there's already a new name. So that is that right? Am I speaking correctly?
Yes, sir.
So
I'll throw this out there, John Mark.
This has been going on for years and years. Back 8-9 years ago, we had 20-something people on our department. And back in those days, any one of the commissioners could just come and join. We told them to send you out there. No training, really. But the materials has changed on these houses. It gets hotter. The vehicles have changed. We've got the new electric cars coming out. And this is stuff that volunteers are not trained on as good as we should be because of our vehicle car fire that's several hours of training. It's just things have changed over the years. We're losing volunteers. We've had some come and commit, but then when you start training, then they don't want to do it. And Mr. Fisher can tell you about that.
I was going to say, and this has been coming on for years, like Jerry just said, but the perfect storm is out there. It just hadn't happened yet. I mean, if we, with those other 12 to 15 that they're talking about there, they're trying to get at that point. But when we get to a structure fire in Nortex District, and Mount Pleasant's out there helping us, there's another structure fire, grass fire, or whatever comes in somewhere else in another district, there's nobody to go. If the volunteers don't show up, which that's been proven over the last 5 to 7 years, that it's gone downhill. And until, when something like that happens, then there we're going to be with a structure fire out there, possibly somebody in it, and nobody to fight the fire. And I mean, it's something that we've got to look at as far as, and I'm not saying this is a perfect contract. There's things in it that I think need to be tweaked and all, but that's something that we've got to look at is what amount of defense do we want to supply to our constituents to be able to protect them in the case of a house fire, vehicle wreck, or whatever it might be.
I I just felt like, from my perspective, of kind of using the gospel, I didn't understand that it was stuff. And I had the expertise in it, so that's why I was there as well. So it's not like it's definitely so I mean, it just come down to that. That's all I have. That is my question.
Would like to comment?
Well, I know we need the firefighters, we definitely need them, but there's got to be an economical way that we can do this instead of just giving this for the next 5 years. I don't, we had we got new commissioners coming in, new judge, and I think every 2 years, they're going to have council members and commissioners or judge or whatever, or commissioners rather, going to be voted in, and I just don't like the blunt of the situation just followed over them, then they've got to take the heat for it. So I would like to prefer a 2-year contract and with a fixed amount.
What would you propose that fixed amount?
Really, just 32%, just 32%, nothing else.
In other words, cap it at 32%?
Yes.
How would you adjust, or what would you, if they said, well, our expenses are going to go up each year, you've got cost of living increases in salary, et cetera, et cetera?
We rarely can get that ourselves. The county can't give our employees cost of living raise every year. They guarantee they're going to get, for the next 5 years, they're going to get a guaranteed. And we, as a county employees, they don't have that option. So we got to look out for the county too.
Well, I like the structure that's under right now, going up to the 40% over 5 years. I just rather have it at a 2-year contract instead of a 5-year contract. Just because of inflation, I understand that their costs are going to go up just like ours do, but 2 years gives everybody a little more say-so in it, especially with the change in the Commissioners Court and the City Council. And go with a 2-year contract at 32% and then 34%, and just let the next 2-year debate go up to 36.8 or 40%. And I think it's going to happen. We're going to need it. I think we're going to be growing. If we don't grow population-wise, we're going to grow structure-wise. Definitely a lot of building going on. There's a lot of businesses that come in to Titus County that people drive here from other counties to work at, so that doesn't necessarily mean they have a home here. And our population grows, but our work population grows every year. So I would suggest a 2-year contract with 32% this year and 34% next year.
Just kind of something going back, your proposal would be a 2-year contract, 32% fixed, and any changes would have to be renegotiated before the end of that contract, before you entered into the next 2 years.
Because, they send it about a refund, but I just don't realize that the county will get a refund.
Just to close out there, I'm not suggesting doing it, but you could enter into a 5-year contract, but just subject to, after 2 years, either party will negotiate. You couldn't do that, if you want to. So you could try to put some type of fixed amount for a little longer time frame, for a little bit more planning purposes, but just give the parties the ability to negotiate.
How would that look if you were calling it a 5-year? What is the 5? What is the 5-year? What is the meaning of it?
Contract, you just have the ability to, either party to. I'm not sure they would agree to that, but you do just have every party to renegotiate.
We've already got that from 12-1. All we have to do is tell them that we're going to have the contract 12-1 in advance.
No, that's true. That's a terminating the contract.
Okay, so you're suggesting 2-year with an agreement that initially we begin it with a 32% of the proposed budget, with the refund back at the end of that year. And then the same thing going into the second year of the 2-year contract, except agreed to go to 34% of that proposed budget, again with the rebate at the end. And then you would have to renegotiate what comes after that 2-year contract somewhere in that second year. Yeah. Parchman, you got any thoughts?
I would go with what Dana said on that. I'm for the 2-year contract to start out with, and maybe around 32%, and renegotiate after that. I think that would be a fair percentage to start with.
I don't think we need to wait until mid-year to start negotiating either, after the second year. If that's what we're going to propose is 2-year, I don't think we need to wait till mid-year to do it. It needs to be done right after the first year, where we'll know come our budget time what we're going to do and what we've got to do.
Yeah, you would certainly need to negotiate that contract or that third year, whatever you call that next term, before your budget. The city would want to do that. The county would want to do that. So knowing that we're starting our budget year here on October 1, we need those numbers probably in June. Okay. Well, and again, I'm not arguing with any of you. Let me make it perfectly clear, and I've told John Mark this. I am happy to assist you all to come to a conclusion. I don't have any agenda. I don't have any preconceived notion of having achieved a certain contract before I go out of office. My only goal is to help you all achieve something that the county and the city can live with, whatever that looks like. I've given you my opinions, but I'm not going to sit here and pout or keep fighting if you all want to go a different direction. I'm perfectly happy with that. I would just caution you that y'all are going to be discussing fire on a pretty frequent basis if you just go with 2-year contracts rather than having something structurally in place that could have the ability to be tweaked from time to time. Here we're coming out of literally a 12-year contract where we have not really done much during that 12 years other than make CPI adjustments, and then we did have some I think some increases there based on additional staffing for the city, so that fell outside of the terms of that contract. So, just remember, if you agree to a 2-year contract, you're talking about this subject a lot more, and maybe that's good. That gives your new people on the court time to to voice their opinions and bring to the court what their constituents have told them, the ones that put them in office. Can we get you on a microphone? And it's not that we can't hear you, it's that we have people that I think will be interested in listening to this on our YouTube channel, and without that, they won't be able to hear.
Yes, it's on. What I would, a 5-year contract, I'm 100% for the fire department, and without a doubt. The problem that I've got is putting us going from the 28, 32, all the way up to 40. That's a big jump, and us not knowing how much we're going to be jumping in that period. If the city would be willing to look at something, I'm not saying 37, meeting them in the middle at 37 and a half and signing a 5-year contract with them is a bad deal. That way we can see, because we're the ones that's giving more to them each time. And I understand that is our protection, but we need to take care of our budget as well as not theirs, because with this right here, they're getting an increase each year for sure. They also have some benefits that they offer the fire department there that we don't offer in the county to our employees with their steps. I know we did give our Sheriff's Department and employees a raise this year, but that's not a set guarantee that we give a raise. There's not a cost of living in our budget for our employees and some of their basis on the firefighting department, and I'm not saying that they ought not get that. They're very important, and I don't want to go into a burning building, not going into a burning building. But on that, we've got other people that we've got to be accountable to on what we give our employees. And if we're giving them something that we're not giving our employees, I feel like we're not doing what we're supposed to do for our people as well. So I want to protect both sides. And at 37 and a half, that's kind of splitting the difference with them. That gives us 5 years to see how that's going. That way they know exactly what they're getting for 5 years. We don't know what that increase will be, but there will be a cost of living. So even if we're going from this 32 to 34 to 36, there's an extra increase on that with that cost of living that goes into that as well. So 5-year contract's not bothering me, but I'd like to try to meet them in the middle somewhere, us get our feet on the ground. All these others have been 10 years with just a slight increase. If we know what we're doing for 5 years, then we can look at it and see if they've brought us to the table what we need, or if we've brought them what they need. We cannot do without the fire department, without a doubt, but also the fire department needs us as well. We give them quite a bit of their budget to help them with this increase. It's helped them be able to lower their tax rate there in the city. So that's just my opinion. I would like to go, the 5 years is not a problem. I just like to try to meet them in the middle, and then we can renegotiate. And if they can show us the numbers, we need to go to 40%, or we may be able to show them the numbers, say, this is how many fires we've had, this is what we've done with the extra men. I do think we do need the extra men for that, to be able to make those calls. It's not always 110 degrees outside, but when it is, and you're in all that gear, as these two gentlemen can attest for, it's a toll on them. You go out on a car wreck or something like that, and they're helping you get people out of a car, they can't stay. You think, well, what's the problem? You look over there, and they're wore out trying to get someone out of a car. So their job's very, very important. I'm not saying that we don't need to support them, just would like a smaller range that we know where we're going from.
Let me ask you to clarify this. Let's in your model there at 37.5%. I'm just going to say 37 just to keep it easier to say.
Well, 37.5 would be the splitting the difference exactly.
Let's assume that their budget each year goes up slightly, so it's trending upward. Are you saying we negotiate 37.5% of this upcoming budget that they've just posted, and it stays there as a fixed amount, or are you saying we'll pay 37.5% of whatever your budget is in each of those 5 years?
The 37.5 would be us paying them on that budget, and then they keep saying that there could be a refund. I'm not looking forward. I don't think we'll see a refund. That's just my opinion.
So in other words, our contribution each year would be different. It would be based on based on the city's budget each year.
Right, but it would just be the 37.5. And
you'd still want to have the rebate provision in there, whether you believe it'll happen or not?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they keep talking about the perfect storm. That's the perfect storm if we get a rebate. So.
Hey, Judge.
Yeah.
I know you've had extensive conversations with the fire chiefs every time I go to the meetings. We're meeting him. With that said, I assume you've had a lot of discussions as to where that 40% come from with their proposal. Could you elaborate on where they came up with that number?
Yeah. And we were all at that meeting where they presented that data to us, and each every 2 months we get that data showing these are the total number of calls that have been made, the mix, like it's a grass fire, it's a structure fire, it's a automobile wreck, whatever the case may be, and he shows whether that's in the county or in the city. And it's not based on the fact that everything that they do is 40% county and 60% city. It's actually a higher percentage than that of of county, but that's predominantly where it comes from, is based on the mix and the location of the calls that they make. They didn't just come up with 40. That's the basis of it, which is what you would expect it to be.
They do factor in the type of fire. I mean, a low-level gas fire, which is not the same level of complexity as a structure fire. Those things are factored in.
Yes. Yeah. So.
I thought it was just on calls only.
Just on what?
I thought it was calls only. Didn't matter what kind of call it was.
Well, he can show you that data, the type and where it was located. He's got all that data as well. Now, is that the correct percentage? I don't know. I mean, that's obviously an arbitrary number that you arrive at based on, a lot of factors, but I guess ultimately it was probably, the chief working with his financial officer to come up with that. If we want to challenge that, we can certainly do that. I don't know. But that's the idea, is that they share, we share the expenses based upon how much we're utilizing the city services. Jimmy, you got any thoughts on how you would fashion the money of this?
Well, I kind of agree with Kent on his deal, and John Mark's deal of the 5-year, doing the 5-year with, but I don't know, I seem to lean towards what Kent was saying there, with beating them in the middle there, seeing what they'll do there.
Instead of that 32 going up to 40, we just find it in the middle and just pay that a percentage, 37.5% of their annual budget. Whatever that is, it goes up each year or goes down, whatever the case may be. We agree to 37.5% for 5 years with the expectation of a rebate at the end of the audited period, giving us that money back if it's not all spent, or us contributing more if they went over their budget. Okay. Any of you 2-year guys have any opinion on that, or does that sound like it's still not achieving your objectives?
What's the percentage of meeting them in the middle, Barbara? From 32 to 40%. Would it be 36? Wouldn't it be halfway? So you would do a 5-year contract at 36%, would be meeting them halfway.
We're already we're going to 32 this year. Brian, I got a little question.
Yeah.
When we are talking about those budgets, and it doesn't matter if it's me and Dana that's on there, if it's you and Dana, or if it's Jeff and Dana, whoever's representing us on that, we get into a budget meeting with them. I know Ed's there, but he's not a voting member. It's the two of y'all, Councilman Adams and Councilman Dale. And the chief gives us this budget. The two of y'all bring it back to the commissioners, and you say, they're wanting the budget to go here. We don't want that. The city says, we want the budget to go there. So now we've got 2 and 2. So how are we going to come to an agreement on that budget, whether we want to pay the increase in that budget? If the city's wanting us to increase it and the county's not wanting us to, kind of puts us in a pickle there. I don't know.
In other words, we're at the table and we say, we don't think you ought to give Christmas bonuses this year. We don't think you ought to give an X% raise this year. We don't think you need a new truck there. I don't know. Here's where, does the tail wag the dog? I don't know. Those are good questions. I think that our participation in their budget talks would certainly be allowable in something of the size of budget line item that we're talking about here. But in the end, how much say-so do we have over their budget? I don't know. I don't know. I think we can ask for anything. And I have found that Ed and the council have been very accommodating to us going through this process. I have seen that in years past, just Ed's willingness to extend our contract for an additional 2 years, I think that they have been accommodating, and I believe that they will continue to be. I don't think that they've been hardline with us, we're not doing that. So I think anything is possible, and I think that's what we're here to discuss is, what can we go to and ask?
Like I said, in the first meeting we had there, that's why I thought we needed representation, because I don't want to just hand them a checkbook and say, go buy Christmas presents and come back and you owe 60% of it, and we owe 40% of it, and they buy a Corvette, and you thought they ought to got a golf cart. It's a lot of leeway there, and I just, before we turn a checkbook over to them, and the problem with them, if we do go, there's not an easy answer to that contract if it's 5 years or 2 years. If we go to 2 years, the council could turn over, because their elections are every 2 years, where ours is every 4 years. So you could be dealing with someone different on the council. My only concern is, in that budget, if we do give them the 37.5, if we disagree with them needing this and they say they do, then we got to figure out where we come to an agreement on that. Do we go to last year's budget or what we need to do on it before we get into something like that?
That's factored into this contract. I mean, we have to trust that they're going to do the right thing. Right?
And I'm not saying that they're not going to do the right thing, but I just want something in our hand. If the whole council changes, what if the whole council changes and they come in there and they say, oh, well, we're going up $2 million on y'all. Y'all got to pay your 40% of it. Not saying it's going to happen, but it could happen. And if we've got our contract out there and we're owing them for that amount of money, then we're on the hook for it.
I think you've only got so much voice in that meeting, is my opinion. You can offer your suggestions and you can cheer from the sidelines, but in the end, it's going to be the council there that's voting. It's not the council plus two. I think we've got to also trust that they're a governmental entity and they're subject to the same amount of scrutiny as we are. And if they've got to pay, 60% or 62.5% of that budget, whatever it is, I guess I'm going to trust the process to a certain extent. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't sit in there on those meetings, but I don't know how you would structure that to where you have a two-voice say in how they
We do have two
formulate
voices right now.
No, but I don't know how our two voices tells them what to do as far as their city budget on fire protection.
That's why I would like to know in that contract what our two voices say. If we say no and y'all say yes, y'all got 60% of it, we got 40. Sorry.
Well, I'm not talking about because there's going to be more people than just the two representatives of the Fire Advisory Board that are voting on their city fire budget. And that's the whole council voting on that.
As is our whole group of commissioners are going to vote on our budget to send that money over there.
That's true.
Judge.
Yes, sir.
In my previous career in trash, and y'all are all businessmen and y'all know it, we never bid a 2-year contract. If we bid a contract, we had to bid it for 5 years because we were going to have to buy the trucks, we were going to have to hire more people, and in order to get the return on the investment that we needed, you couldn't do it in 2 years. We would never have set a new city in a 2-year contract. Now, this is different, but Mr. Cooper, are you saying that, and I'm asking this because I'm a little confused and I just want to make sure, that starting next year we're going to give 37.5 and we're going to stay at 37.5, or we're going to go to 32 and to 34 up to the 37.5?
Well, I don't mind split the difference on 5 years set.
So 5 years going 37.5.
Well, I'm still not sure how that math works.
I don't either, but
I'm still not sure where you get the 37.5. It seems to me if we're going to split the difference with them, it ought to be a little lower than that.
What are we paying now, Barbara?
I'm sorry?
What are we paying right now for the fire protection county part of it?
28%.
well, it may be 28%, but we do not have an agreement of that.
Right.
We just had a 10-year agreement to the CPI, so whatever the consumer price index was, we got one every year. During our original meeting with them, we discussed it. I think it's very fair what they suggested, very, very fair. But they didn't know what their new budget was going to be, and so, we didn't anticipate that the increase in some of these going to their current budget. That's my concern. That's my reason why. Thank you for recognizing it. I think we should not pay based on budget at all. I think it's very important that we pay on audited figures. Prior year audited figures, with any task force reimbursement subtracted from that they get for going to those county task force. I'm sure that firemen know what that is. And I think we need something from their outside auditor. A simple a few items in there that says, here's what the fire department costs were, here's the task force separated from that, here's the net. And I do not want to put the county or the city in a difficult position where they have to fund their budget. So we could, all of it before our money comes in. So we could continue with what we were paying, or we could increase the percentage and then adjust it when those audited figures come out. Those normally come out sometime in January. So it would be about 4 months if they would need to continue, with the prior numbers. But I agree with the question about what are we going to do about capital outlay? Where does that fall? And perhaps we just take it out of the contract and negotiate that separately. But at the end of the day, we have to come to an agreement with the city. So we need to figure out how we do that and what that looks like. But again, I just want to caution you, it's very important that we go with audited figures, not budgeted figures, because we have the responsibility, fiduciary responsibility to the Titus County taxpayers to make sure that we're paying actual cost, whatever cost it is that y'all agree to and the city agrees to. I think that's very important.
She also brought up a good point. If you want to take some risk out of this, you just take the capital out and negotiate it separately. Unknowns, risk and unknowns. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And then they could bring us, here's the mileage on the trucks, here's the number of years old, here's the new equipment, better life-saving equipment for, the person who's in the fire and for our firemen and ladies are going to be out there working. There may be need to buy something for little we, as commissioners or accountants, we can realize that. But they would know that before we do. I think it's very important.
I do think that the intention, John Mark, is that we do participate in capital expenditures. The big trucks that we used to every few years, we pay for one and they pay for the next one. That stuff goes away, but when it comes time to buy that $1.3 million engine, it's then put on some kind of 10-year, 15-year note, and rather than us putting in a lump sum of $500,000, we participate in their budget, based on those lease payments or whatever it is. Same with a third fire station. That thing's amortized over 50 years, 40 years, however it might be financed. We would contribute.
That clearly helps them be able to plan better. I get that.
Yeah, but I do think that this does intend, they fully expect us to participate in those major capital expenses. And Barbara, while I understand precisely what you're talking about, I respectfully disagree. I think it's very reasonable for us to, we're essentially like your escrow payment of your house note. You're paying in an amount, and at the end of the year, they're going to make that adjustment, as opposed to, well, we're going to pay based on last year. We're always going to pay you, but this year, based on last year's numbers. That's another way to do it, but it just seems more cumbersome to me, and therefore, I personally don't have a problem with paying a monthly amount based on their proposed budget, knowing that I'll get some kind of an adjustment, whether it's up or down at the end of that year.
Actually, I think we're saying the same thing, just at a different time in the contract. I agree we need to continue to pay them a monthly amount. I'm not saying that changes. I'm saying that we settle up with them in January when they get their audit something from their outside auditor that says, here's the cost, here's any reimbursement from any task force subtracted from that, and here's the number. And then we adjust right away. So we're not talking about a year, we're talking about 4 months, normally.
Well, if they have a $300,000 increase in their budget for the 22-23 year that they're asking for, and we're saying, no, we're going to pay you on that old $300,000 less budget, there is a bit of difference there.
There is a difference there, and you can also have in the contract an adjustment for that. But I think we have a duty to our taxpayers to pay the final number based on audited figures, not just their end years. And you know, here's what we see.
I respect your opinion.
And I do yours.
Well, aren't you getting that same thing at the end if they gave you a rebate? I'm asking because I'm not, I don't have the knowledge you do, so that's why.
We don't have that information. We don't have audited information. Their audit report is out there, but the fire costs are in, I believe, public safety. So there's not any way for us to know what the actual fire costs were.
But it come January I'm not saying this year, I said if you went into that contract and you paid the 37 to 32, whatever you paid, come next January, when you've got final numbers, and then you can see all the numbers and you have your copy and everything's deducted, then you're settled for the year. If they give you a rebate or come back and say, Barbara, we need another $1,000. So aren't you essentially doing that at the end of the year? Ain't that what you're wanting to do?
At the end of the year, but I want to do it based on audited numbers.
Right, which you'll get at the end of the year.
In January.
Right.
In January, we'll get those for the prior September 30th.
Okay.
Because that's, you know, when the fiscal year ends, September 30th, the audit is completed sometime in January.
Okay, I think I'm finally just now making the connection. You say you give them some amount for those first 4 months, and then in January, okay, now we're going to adjust I see what you're saying.
Okay.
I want to be more than fair, because I think it's very important. I agree with what you have on your list here.
I think that Barbara says it's good practice to be transparent and to pay based on what we know to be the truth rather than what we project to be the truth. And she's probably a little less trusting than I am. I think that's one of the differences. But I completely understand her desire and to be transparent and responsible with county dollars. And now I see if there's just a 4-month timing difference, that doesn't sound like we're that far off in our opinions.
So do we go to the city and say, okay, yeah, we'll do the 5-year, but we want to start the 5-year on January 1st?
Oh, I think we're still discussing that.
But I'm just saying that's what I'm trying to just throw in that, you know.
Well, that's my hope, is that we come out of this meeting with a consensus that we all buy into, and Dana and I can go back there and say, you know, we've talked about this, we would feel more comfortable with this. Can you guys accept that?
Right.
What I was asking Barbara, no, right now we're paying 30%, but if we jump up to 35, say 37.5%, what's that going to do to the budget for this year after we've already set the budget? I mean, we're going to be able to afford that right off the bat.
Good point.
I mean, if that's what y'all decide to do, that's what we'll have to do.
I mean, what's it going to do to our budget right now, that percentage, if we start off with that right
Depends
now?
on whatever their final budget.
Well, let's say it's about 3.7 million.
3.7.
Let's go back and talk about this 37.5, and maybe I'm missing something, but what I'm looking at is if they're proposing 32 to start and 40 to end, why don't we meet halfway in between there and say 36?
Or 34.
36.
Yeah, 36.
36 would be right.
In your proposal, if you start that now, aren't we ultimately going to end up with what's all over here with more? Well, if you're saying this year we'll give them 30, they're asking for 32%.
And that's a initial jump of that's just where we're starting at 32. Yeah, to achieve 40.
But if he's saying we're going to give them 36 starting now, we're giving 4% more now. Then
then next year we go to,
No, it'd be a 5-year contract.
Then next year, you give them 2% more, you give them 2% more than they're asking. The third year, you're giving them exactly what they asked for, and the last 2 years, you're giving them 2% less and 4% less.
okay. It just looked like we're giving 4% more now, and 4% was going to be over the 4%. Maybe not. 36 would be the rate for 5 years. Okay.
36% in the last 2 years of a 5-year contract's going to save us, 4% there. So if they would go for that, that'd be a pretty good deal, 36% for 5 years. If they won't go for that, let's just do a 3-year contract, do the 32, 34, then 36. And after the third year, renegotiate. Are we going to stay at 36 or do we need to go to 38? But if they would take that 36 for 5 years, that'd be a good deal too.
And I would go for that too.
I can answer your question.
Okay.
Our current budget as it stands right now is $1,119,000 and some change. If we go to 32% of their current proposed budget of $3.7 million and some change, that's an increase of $84,000 over what we currently have budgeted. If we go to 32%.
Wait a minute, 32% of what? What was your?
Of their proposed budget.
3.7?
3.7.
I thought it was more like a $200,000 jump, no?
We already have 125 million. Our current budget already has.
Oh, okay, that we've already
So that's just
budgeted.
a
So we
2%
need to squeeze another $80,000 out of our contingency.
That would just be
Well, what she's saying is we've already increased our budget some to match what we were tentatively talking about here, going to a 32% increase. If we jumped it up to 36, we would need another $80-some-odd thousand out of this year's budget.
32, not 36.
32%.
What would it be, you go to 36%?
I can. Just one second.
As I recalled, they were proposing a 5-year stair step with the first year going to 32, then 34, 6, 8, 40. Why wouldn't 35% be meet them in the middle?
Yeah, where we are now.
Okay. If we go to 36% of the current proposed budget of $3.7 million, that costs us $1,354,000 and some change. Okay? And we're at $1 million. I can't talk and run this little tiny calculator at the same time. That would cost us an additional $235,290.
the 36%.
And that would make our increase this year, just this year, be $360,290.
I think the city's initial intention was to soften the blow for the county. They talked about it being phased in over 3 years at first, but we would be willing to consider 5, and we said, yeah, let's do it over 5. We all like that. And why? Because it smooths things a little. Each of those annual bites is not quite so difficult to swallow. That's why I like the current stair-step approach rather than jumping up that much. It may benefit us more in those later years, but you're talking about a substantial amount right now that we don't have budgeted.
That's not good.
So we've got $100,000 in our contingency, and if we went to 36,000, we would spend, or we would budget 235 of that right off the top.
What if we went to 35? Because again, right now we're well below 30%. So if they were proposing 5 annual increases, with the first one starting immediately, I think we would have.
35% would be a reduction of about $38,000.
That's all.
I like that, if they were accept the 35% over a 5-year period with a stair-step approach, that'd be a good deal of mine.
But now you're still willing to pay 35% of their budget, even though we have reason to think it's going to increase every year.
Well, over a 5-year contract on that, yes. But yeah, I mean,
In other words, you don't calculate the 35% based on this year's budget and keep that fixed amount for 5 years.
No,
You agree to mold with their budget over each of the 5 years.
And just to clarify, that would include a potential 35% of the new fire station as well, correct? Because that would affect, they could budget to build a new fire station in year 3. And it would be-
Well, and again, just like they would do, if they finance that, but the answer is yes, but it wouldn't mean, a $5 million fire station, we've got to come up with 35% of $5 million. If they're going to amortize it or pay for it over 20 years, 25, 30 years, or whatever, we're paying those little bites like they are as well.
But just so everybody's aware, it could include, that would be.
Yeah, and we already know it's going up. I can't imagine a scenario where their budget would go down if they're adding, $70,000 package firefighters, 2 at a time each year or 3 at a time.
And, just an assumption, if you're going to have a 50% increase in staff, they're probably going to want to build that fire station because they're going to be crammed in there like sardines.
No, not according to the way he described it. He seems to be much more concerned about staffing, at least Chief does, than about a physical structure. Now, granted, I'm going to assume he's the one with the biggest motivation out of everybody in the room to have that. But he's not been adamant about, I need that station right now. He is saying, we really need that in the next 5 years. Will his council support him on that? I don't know. They've still got the lion's share of this budget. And maybe they will find ways to delay that. Maybe they put up a more temporary structure, or maybe they put some equipment out at Preferts. That concept has been talked about. Where you kind of have a pseudo third station, as it were. But yes, you're right. You started off with the point, if we agree to 35% or whatever percentage, whatever they put in that budget, we're agreeing to it.
They do have enough room to put another engine and possibly another grass truck and house the firefighters for now.
Yeah, up to 15.
Up to 40, up to 45 total firefighters.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
How old are the numbers? When did we do that survey when it said we needed that 35?
16. 16.
So, that all needs to be redone.
It'll need to be redone before they, and you're probably looking at a year to 2 years to get that done, because we was almost a year with that one. So it would, by the time you get somebody on board to do it and all that, you're probably looking at least 2 years, if not 3.
From y'all's perspective, that I was sure we'll take that before, in year 3. That way, when you renegotiate this 5, you got fresh information.
Good point.
Yeah.
How much does that cost?
I think we paid $60,000 the last time. We paid 30 each.
The reason I asked that question is because I think, I read this contract, I think possibly we're going to have some additional insurance-related costs. We may not, but when I read this, it seems that it says that, everyone in the city and the county is responsible for their own insurance costs. And I don't know, I don't have the experience or the expertise or the insurance knowledge to know where that would break down, in that event. Because right now we are that, we have volunteer fire departments, but we don't have, county-wide fire departments. So I think our insurance costs would go up. So
What type of insurance?
I don't know, but I've worked at the city before, and I've experienced doing that and doing audits, and I know that they pay costs related to, it's more of a liability coverage is what it is. It's not the vehicles itself, you're going to have less coverage. But I don't know the answer to that question, but we may need to talk to someone in PAC or someone who's an insurance type person to give us that information. My goal is to look at all the costs in the county, and I think this fire survey and possibly insurance would be something that we would also incur. Possibly not. But
Again, I'm not sure what kind of, I'm trying to understand your line of thinking. What kind of, to guard us against what?
Being sued for not being where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there.
That's going to be that whole harmless that we talked about.
That what?
Remember we talked about the whole harmless at the last meeting?
Well, that's kind of where what I wanted to make a comment on that, but I'm trying to see what kind of insurance would. See, I would think that we would be given a case for an insurance company to say, hey, we're all in better shape now. We're spending more money for fire protection, but I don't know. I will say that one of the major concessions that the city made, well, I don't know if it's a major, I think it's a reasonable concession. Initially, the wording in this contract said something like, the county agrees to hold the city harmless if the city gets sued. And I didn't feel like that was right. You know, if the city fire department that we're paying, we're hiring to work for us, you know, is negligent, and we can't say, well, don't worry about that. If you get sued for, you know, not doing things right, the county will protect you. And we said that's not reasonable, and they agreed, and they took that out of there. So you don't find any of that hold harmless verbiage in this contract. You know, whoever's responsible, and I think there's a comment in there about joint responsibility that we'll let the legal system work it out as far as who is liable if there is joint negligence on behalf of the city and the county.
Judge, that kind of brings up this, in your notes about outside counsel. This attorney, this young lady out of San Antonio, she's been retained by the city, not by us. We have not entered into any kind of attorney-client relationship with her. She represents them. So, I mean, her job is to serve their best interest, not ours. So, with that said, I don't know that we need to necessarily have John Buffet or somebody in his firm negotiate every step of the way with us, but I do feel like we ought to at least have a subject matter expert like him or someone at his firm to review at least the final product. I mean, or at least where as we get closer in, because
Totally fine. Totally agree with that.
Just like Kerry Wooten, I mean, he stepped aside. He's not involved in this. They brought in their own, and I looked at her resume. I mean, she's an expert in this stuff, and I feel more comfortable if we at least had. We've used John before. I'm not sure. I haven't contacted him, but he's a very knowledgeable attorney. He's represented us in the past on employment issues, and I don't know that he'd help us on this, but he would probably.
Or he'd have an idea of somebody that could.
Right way. But that would be my suggestion: is at least have someone that towards the end of the process look over some of those issues, like this joint and several liability. Why are we, you know? I don't really know if they're providing all the services. It doesn't sound like we're going to be doing much, you know. So anyway, that would just be something I would recommend.
Each party shall be liable for any costs, claims, liens, damages, causes of actions, and suits of any kind related to the acts or omissions of such parties, agents, officers, employees, or subcontractors. That terminology wasn't in there when we began this. In the event the parties are found jointly liable, in other words, county, city, by a court of competent jurisdiction, liability shall be apportioned comparatively in accordance with the laws of the state of Texas. That's way over my pay grade, and so that's why stuff like that, I would feel comfortable having an expert representing us that took that and knows what that terminology means and say, yep, that's as good as you can state it, or no, we need to completely dismantle that.
I'm not a contract attorney, so I don't know if that's, you know, I understand what those terms mean. I don't know if that would be, I don't know if that's normal and customary for a contract like that.
I think it'd be worth, you know, a couple $1,000s to have somebody look over that. Yeah.
is where I came up with my question about insurance. Because it says each party to the agreement shall maintain each with appropriate insurance policy providing comprehensive general liability insurance, auto liability, and physical damage coverage, and workers' compensation insurance. I think those are common terms that are usually in there, but because it's just one, different kind of contract, because it's a joint contract, I'm going to make sure we may need to get the tax and see if there are, but I don't know.
Sure. Well,
What I like about it, we're not going to get hit with that, buying a new fire truck every so many years. I don't know when they'll buy their next one, but this will include total expenses to them. So we won't be getting hit with $300,000, $350,000, maybe $400,000 next time they buy a new engine. Be included in what we can agree to pay.
so let me verbalize what I've heard is that we go back to the city and say, we're willing to pay a percentage of your budget. We're willing to pay a percentage of that budget increase each year, but we would prefer to agree upon a fixed percentage over the until the next contract renewal, which is 5 years, rather than stair-stepping it each year. And we as a court are willing to take a substantial chunk out of our contingency budget in order to do that. That's what I'm hearing y'all say. And my suggestion would be we try to get 35% with the logic that, we're below 30 right now, and they were wanting to begin at 30 and increase it in the first year to 32, 4, 6, 8, 40%. Let's say that 35% is meeting them in the middle. We agree to a 5-year. We agree that during that 5 years, and I guess I better be writing all this down.
Could Barbara run some numbers first? I mean, you could run some numbers and give an estimate of what this is. I mean, I don't even know if this is a good deal.
Well, where we're going to be in the jam is this first year, because when we go into next year, we'll budget that. But this year we haven't budgeted that.
We're just spitballing these numbers, and she can give you a good estimate as to whether 35% makes sense or if it's, I don't know. I mean, you need to.
I do have a concern for us to go with $400,000 in our contingency, and if we agree to, 35%, that's going to be half of it's going to be gone right off the bat.
Well, you can always go back and make an emergency amendment, which is what we used to do, and we got away from that by wisely going with a contingency. But she brings up a good point. You're taking a huge chunk out of your $400,000 here in year one. Now next year you'll just
start out at 30 and go up that 5-year contract. It's still going to be that amount of money coming out at one time, $400,000. Is that correct?
No. We've already filed our budget.
Yeah.
And so anything that we have not budgeted for increase in this fire protection budget nearly an adequate amount. Now, next year, when we start the budget process, we'll know what this number is. And so we won't be talking about having to use contingency. But this first year to go to 35% is going to take a big piece of your, well over half of your contingency budget.
What I was talking about, now starting out like at 32% and going up to 5% in that 5-year period. Why couldn't we do that?
Well, you can do anything you want to do. You want your cake and you eat it too. I'm not sure that you can have everything that you want. We want all the benefits of both. I think.
There was already talking about stair stepping it anyway. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable pulling it all out at one time. So we could do it in a 5-year period. That'd be.
Well, again, you can always have an emergency amendment like we used to do in the days before we had that contingency in our budget that allows us to use money for unforeseen things, we pull it out of contingency. 5 years ago, before we had that, we would sit here and have 2 or 3 emergency budget amendments during the year. Well, we could do that. We could leave our $400,000 contingency alone. We could make an emergency one-time budget amendment of whatever that figure is that she said, $250,000 one time.
Well, if we go to the 32 this year, that's what they've asked for. Why couldn't we go to the 32 this year, the 35 next year? That way we know what we gonna have to budget, and then it'd be 35 for the next.
I think a more reasonable argument would be go to 36 that next year. You know, if you're, that would then split 32 to 40.
Split it. But go 32 this year, since we've got our budget set, and all for that, or pretty close to it, then the next year.
Then agree that the next 4 years, you go to 36%.
Yeah.
And that's meeting them in the middle period, so
Yeah.
that'd be generous on us this year. I mean, that would be.
That way we don't have to worry about any of this other, the contingency and all of that. We go to the 32 that we're already set for, then next year we'll go to 36, and that's where we'll stay till the end of this 5-year term.
We're effectively saving 1 year in that scenario, right? 1 year. That's all you're saving. I don't know if that's good or not. I'm just saying, you're only saving 4% 1 year from that.
Well, you're saving in those last 2 years.
38, 40, you know, because we're at 36 year 3, so we're willing to pay 36 year 2. So that 38 drop is washed, so we're really only saving 50 year, 4% 50 year in that scenario.
Joe D., I don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you have any comments you'd like to add to this? Joe D. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I didn't know if you cared to elaborate on any of this today or not.
Good answer.
Well, you do.
So if you look at that last proposal, you only save 4%, or how much money are we actually saving on that?
Well, here's the thing, John Martin's right. The numbers that we're throwing out here today, that's all between, it's our best. But I will tell you this, Judge Lee, and Mr. Applewhite, and all those people at the city that work diligently. Y'all met several times. I don't know why we would agree to pay more than what they're asking for. Why would we agree to pay more? They're asking
Yes,
for
sir.
36, 34, 36.
We may be
38,
delayed.
40. I don't know why we would agree to pay more. In any case.
That's what I was trying to say earlier. We go up from 32 to 35, we're paying 3%. At the end of the day, it looks to me like they're going to get the same amount of dollars in 5 year period. And we're paying it, y'all, the county, we're paying more up front instead of just letting it come in. Yeah.
And there's one more thing too, I think we need to repeat. 32% is not in this year's budget. Even at 32%, we'll have to add about $85,000 more dollars to that, to the current budget, for next year's budget. But that's the lesser of the two. And you agree with this proposed contract.
We have 10 minutes. I have probate court starting at 11. I don't mind delaying them a little bit, but I'm not going to delay them a long time. Or I can have the hearings in my office and y'all can continue to discuss.
Well, I think if it's 35 or 36%, whatever we do on it, that's why I want to coast into it. I don't want to do it all at one time. I don't think that's good business to do that. That's my opinion. I just think we need to kind of ease into it each year, and that way we can kind of handle it a little bit better. It's not a big impact on our budget. So.
Well, that's why I thought the 2% per year achieved that same objective.
I just want to make clear, that the idea that Mr. Affleck, the person, you say that this be a 2-year contract, everybody's agreed it's not. Well, everybody's all agreed it's a 5-year contract. Is that right?
Well, we can go back and revisit that. We could say we want a 2-year contract, but we're willing to pay this percentage.
Because you need to know. If we're going to negotiate, you need to know.
Yeah.
Should I go back to that? I think it's a big contract as well.
Simplifies it from our perspective to do it a year. It complicates matters for them for planning purposes if we do that. So I don't know what the balance of that would be. It's fair. But it definitely helps us in 2 years. I don't know if they go along with it. They can't really do a lot of planning on the same 2-year basis, especially about building infrastructure and stuff.
But what the chief was saying, that he wanted 5 years, because they want out here, firefighter, a guarantee, they try to get it coming down, but you only got a 2-year guarantee on this year. They don't want to know about that, so we don't want to be there, and maybe got a 3rd year. I know what you right. For the 2nd year. It's like this, if that 2 years is up, and you decide they're not gonna redo it, and they're letting people off that, right, they're like those. But the second engine company is, I think it's Chris, and I think y'all all agree with this, and Jerry will agree, getting those 4-inch men out there sooner than later is vital to this county. Because I'm not going to be the one standing there trying to explain. I don't want to be put in this position why we can't go by fire because we can't do the same thing. When it becomes unsafe for Jerry and I to buy fire, and we say, look, we can't do this. And I had this conversation with Brian the other day. When it happens and I feel that I'm unsafe as a volunteer firefighter anymore, I'm going to walk away, guys. When I walk away, I take probably about 5 or 6 of my family members with me because they're going to say if it's unsafe for Dad, it's unsafe for us. Therefore, if that were to happen, you're fixing to cripple 2 county fire departments. Because we are the ones that respond. We'll have 2 or 3 people left on each of those departments. Because we're the numbers. You can pull up numbers off the run sheet and see who's responding. And if you're not responding, get ready, you fix it to shut 2 departments down. Because the numbers aren't going to be there tonight. You're going to have 2 or 5 departments that are the exact same place you got Sugar Hill struggling, trying to make room.
And I've already come to that point, Marcus, about 2 years ago that I said, I'm through. I can't do it safely. I'm through. I'll support. I'll do whatever I can to help, but I'm through with going in and anything else. So.
I've got training to go in. I don't feel safe going in anymore to that extent. That's why I'm no longer a church provider. Because my personal opinion, I don't want to put myself in that situation.
Or somebody that's going in with you. I mean, if somebody's going in with you and you go down, then you're putting them at a disadvantage and putting.
Judge, this is kind of summing this up. what I was just thinking is, why don't we let Art put together a spreadsheet, make some assumptions, and of the different scenarios and different percentages, so y'all can see bottom line numbers instead of us guessing like this. Because, what was concerning me is that some of the initial numbers that we thrown out, we may, like Art was saying, we may end up paying more money. And we don't, it's just because we're still on this, so you can run some spreadsheet, put a spreadsheet together. I think that's a good idea. Better information than one decision.
We could recess this meeting until this afternoon or back in the morning at 9 o'clock.
How long will it take you to get those figures? Well, I've got an appointment at 2:30 this afternoon.
And I've got a guardianship at 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, so it would have to, I would say 3 o'clock. I've got a morning open in the morning till 11. We can't recess more than 24 hours, but we could recess until 9, or we'd meet back here at 3 o'clock. 9?
9 in the morning.
Yeah, just do it in the morning. Okay. All right. Let the record show that at 10:57 we recessed this meeting, and we will reconvene at 9 a.m. on the 30th of August, same place.
I make that motion.
Motion is made by Commissioner Parker. Second by Commissioner Fitch. All in favor, say aye. Aye.